Trish Close. Co-founder of Holler Hospitality, Jen Quist, is on the podcast today. Jen talks about growing up in the Bay Area, selling real estate in San Francisco for a few years before she says her true passion was calling her name. That led her to Culinary School in New York City, and she actually worked back east for a few years before the Pacific Northwest was calling her home. She opened up a restaurant in Portland, Oregon, a restaurant she says she learned a lot from, by the way. She did some consulting work for other restaurants and bars in the Portland area before Holler Hospitality was born. She says she was really looking for a place not necessarily that provided something unique or special, but really she wanted to give guests a sense of nostalgia and comfort. A little housekeeping note on this podcast. About 20 minutes into the interview, I just checked to make sure we were still recording because, I'm a professional. And somehow that created a glitch in my audio. I apologize for that. My audio is crappy, but Jen sounds fantastic, and really, she's the one that matters in this interview. So beyond all of that, the interview itself is incredibly interesting, and the story behind Holler Hospitality and how it got its name, maybe one of my favorites. Here's Jen Quist.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Quick question. Does anybody call you Jen Q?
Oh, I have so many. JQ, Jen Q, Jenny Q.
Those are good. JQ is really good.
JQ, yeah. I mean, again, the Q. Like I'm getting married in the next year. Hopefully, we'll see, just because of COVID and everything.
Right.
But it's real hard to think of losing that Q. I love it.
Okay, so you are going to take the last name of your partner.
I will be taking his last name, yes. But I think I'm going to make it my middle name.
Okay, so that's what I did, because we were actually, before I hit record, we were talking about last names. Sorry, everyone, just to catch you up. But Baruki is actually my middle name because I love it so much. I didn't want to lose it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like I'm going to, carry it on.
Yeah, absolutely. You should.
So, I'm gonna keep it.
Okay, enough of that. Jen Quist, thank you for being here. You're the co-founder, development operations of Holler Hospitality.
That is right.
Okay.
Yes.
Restaurant
in Portland,
group
Oregon.
In Portland, Oregon. Restaurant group.
Yep, restaurant group. We've been around we started it 6 years ago, but our initial project opened in end of 2018. So we've been active as a restaurant group really since the end of 2018.
Fantastic. Where are you from originally, Jen?
I'm from the Bay Area, the East Bay, but Pacific Northwest has always really been my home. Most of my family either lives here in Portland or in Seattle. Both of my parents are from the Pacific Northwest, so I always knew I would end up here. Somewhere between Seattle and Portland. Always felt more like home to me.
For sure. The Bay Area has always had this sort of dreamy kind of feel for me. Like I love visiting it. What was it like growing up there?
I loved it. So I grew up in a pretty small town in the East Bay. So right on the other side of a big hill from Berkeley. Kind of, just this, it was a real dreamy childhood as far as, living in a bubble. Like we, rolling hills, green, pretty, small town again, like I said, but it was very, we were like a stone's throw away from Berkeley and San Francisco, but it just felt very like isolated in a way. And again, in a bubble. So not a lot of culture. I would sneak off to Berkeley for that when I got to be in high school, but
Not a girl.
I loved it. I mean, I love the Bay Area. I think it's magical. I agree with you. Growing up there, and after college, I actually lived in San Francisco for 10 years and loved that. I mean, that city is a fantastic city.
Right. And I know even Berkeley, may sound weird. You may get it. Berkeley smells different in a good way.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like just this balmy, lavender, rosemary kind of like it just smells good walking around in Berkeley. Is that weird or is that accurate?
No, it's not weird at all. It's really funny that you say that because like I can, from being in high school on Telegraph, because that's like where we knew to go, right by UC Berkeley, it always smelled like incense. So I'm right there with you. Like it, it had this patchouli vibe. So I get it.
For
like,
sure.
I can actually smell it and picture it and like exactly where I would be walking down Telegraph. So you're pretty spot on.
Yeah. Well, smells are huge, especially for, I think, people who really love food and wine and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
We really do pay attention to smells, I think, more maybe than other people. I know you went to school in Washington, right?
Mm-hmm. University of Washington.
What were you studying?
Communications. Having fun. I really wanted, my dad went there. And like I said, he's from Seattle. And so it was the only place I wanted to go. I applied, I think, to like 9 schools, a couple of them UC, got into everything. But that school was impossible to get into. They only accepted 10% out of state for this giant school. And so it took me a minute to get in there. And, like once I got there, yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had a great time.
Well, when you're faced with those kind of stats and you get in, it's almost like I have to go now. I have to.
Right. And again, it's the only place I wanted to go. I mean, it's like I grew up, kind of fantasy, like just thinking of it as just being this dreamy place, which it is. It's a beautiful school. It's on the water. I mean, wow. Seattle is such a gorgeous city. And it's like right, by kind of the heart of Seattle too, near downtown. So you felt like you were in a city. It was really different for me from growing up in a smaller, town in California. It was great to like have all of this activity and diversity and everything that I just hadn't, really been exposed to.
I was going to say culture. There you go.
Yep. There you go. Oh, I was 2 blocks from it and it was everywhere.
How cool.
It was great. Yeah, very, very much so.
What were you studying? What did you want to be?
I don't think I necessarily knew. And that, really was evident when I graduated from college. Like I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I liked working with people. I knew that I wanted to be, social in whatever it was that I chose to do. I wanted to live in San Francisco. So like, after graduating and moving there, it was such a like time for like the .com boom. And so I knew that, again, I wanted to be with people and do something fun and work really hard. I've always had a job since I was 14 years old. So, working has always been in my blood, never allowed to not have a job in my family.
Yeah.
But I really didn't have like this specific goal, and so moving to San Francisco, I got into the .com world and like into the startup world. And that was so exactly where I wanted to be. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I think I just had it in my blood. And again, it's why I don't think I like had this path necessarily that I was going down, but I knew that I was, creative and again, loved working with people and just loved to be thrown into the fire and was, just going to find that wherever I landed, which I did. And, for my first job out of college was in a startup situation, and it was so fun. And it's basically, I think I've put myself in that position my entire career.
Being a part of something new, sounds like, is really what lights your fire. Okay.
Definitely. Creating, from the ground up is definitely, I think, where my passion lies for sure.
Okay. So what year was this? That's like was that in the thick of the startup kind of?
It was, like 98, 99.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, did you graduate? Did you graduate college you graduated college in 98 and then moved to San Francisco? Okay. So I read that you actually did real estate in San Francisco.
I did. So I started, my first job was at a startup. I was the 8th employee of the startup called LoopNet, which is now a huge company and used by, it was commercial real estate database, basically. And now it's this big, big company that everyone in the commercial real estate world uses.
Crazy.
Which was so cool. Like, eighth employee as like an assistant, then was running my own department by the time I was like 24, because that's just, or 23, because that's just the way that it worked with, startups back then. Like, you got in, you worked crazy hours nonstop, and you grew really fast in whatever it was that you were doing. So, I was really like in commercial real estate in a sense at that point. With this company. And then I actually went and worked for my dad for a few years. I was in client services. So I was, helping him with a new company that he was starting and working on the client services side, and then really got into residential real estate because I wanted to be, I was traveling a lot for working for my dad all over the country. And I really wanted to be like grounded at home back in San Francisco, and real estate was just like the perfect opportunity to, kind of create my own business and be in San Francisco and like really dive into that city, because that's what you have to do when you're in real estate. That was so much fun. I loved it so much. Real estate still such a hobby, I say, of mine. I'm totally fascinated by it. But as when I was in there for the .com boom, I was also there for a crash. And so that was kind of when I decided to get out of real estate.
How long did you do real estate in San Francisco?
For about 4 years.
Okay.
But like dabbled in it before that, but 4 solid years.
So what kind of real estate are we talking? Like homes?
Residential.
Okay.
Yep.
I can't insane. I mean, I'm so curious what that was like in a city like San Francisco.
And also it was at the height of everything. So like all of my friends who had started in startups, years before, were making so much money.
Sure.
Was like also with real estate, like no money down, you just are paying all cash for places. And so it was the perfect time to have a real estate career. I mean, truly, like it was, my friends were dropping, and that's what real estate is. It's just your network. Right. And so like, I just was just working with all of my friends all the time, and they were dropping like $3 million in cash. And I did not have that money, but it was really fun, working with them and finding these incredible places, and seeing everything in San Francisco. This is also before San Francisco really like boomed with all of this new development. It was still, preserved in that classic San Francisco time. I mean, it was happening, new development was coming, but it hadn't really hit yet. So that's what I love about that city. I grew up going into the city and, with my dad, because he worked in the city, and having lunches in these classic spots. And so I loved being a part of San Francisco in that way when I was selling.
Oh, I'm sure. How fun. How exciting. Do you
It was great.
Do you watch any of the like real estate reality shows? Any of them?
All of them. Every single one, probably.
So I don't know a ton of them. I know they exist. There was one I've seen a few episodes of. Help me. Is it Selling Sunset? Does that sound right?
Selling Sunset. Oh yeah.
Whoa. I mean, take out the drama. The real estate is fascinating to look at. Some of these homes in the hills. Wow.
And just so much money. I mean, it blows my mind. That's just that's real estate, but it's just, being in San Francisco and doing it, it was so much fun to get to see, to be exposed to that, for sure.
Some of the clients I know that are on that show, they're like, yeah, his budget is, some ridiculous $1 million, whatever amount. I almost want to be like, nah, that just can't be real.
I know, but it is. Like, I mean, it's just right. Or when like someone walks in and they're like, oh, I can spend, 8 to 12. And you're like, that's a big gap. Like,
yeah,
you have 8 and then you can go to 12. It's pretty unbelievable.
No, it's incredible. But I do understand the fascination of real estate, especially when you're talking about high dollar homes. They're insane. They're beautiful. And some of those even in San Francisco, you're talking about, maybe historic too places.
Well, right. Yeah, and that's the thing. I sold mainly in the north part of town, which
Mm,
is like Cow Hollow, Pacific Heights,
mm,
the marina, which is like finite in its, you know, inventory
yeah.
because there's no development really, and you can only go. So it's like, all of these beautiful old condo
Yes.
or not condos, but things that have been turned into condos and
Hmm.
people who are remodeling them, but still just the charm in there with the built-ins and, just all of that. Just, it's so special.
Okay, so you're doing real estate in San Francisco. Is it at this point that you take sort of a hard left into the
Uh-huh.
culinary world? How did that happen?
So I was doing back then I was doing a little bit of catering also. So
Oh,
I would just to make some extra money, I would cater for a friend of mine's company. I also had friends in San Francisco who were opening restaurants and bars left and right and totally fascinated by that,
hmm.
and not like doing anything with them, but like so involved in the process because I was really, interested in it. And then I was also doing a little bit of, so when I would cater for a friend, it was mainly just like serving and that was it. But I would also throw parties and do a little bit of catering work for brokers for open houses.
Hmm.
And so, you know, it was something that I was really interested in as far as like food, restaurants, hosting. I was raised by hosts, my mom and dad. So like I, grew up being around parents who love to throw parties and everything. So anyway, it was just like this whole world that I also really loved. And when the market started to tank, I was like, I kind of want a change of scenery. I've been here for 10 years.
Hmm.
If I don't move somewhere now, I'll probably stay here forever, which wouldn't be the worst thing, but I wanted a change. And so I, started really thinking about culinary school and I looked into programs in the Bay Area and nothing really like was that interesting to me. And I actually went on a trip to London with my dad and looked at Cordon Bleu there and that wasn't really interesting to me. And I was like, then maybe this isn't for me. And then I went on a trip to New York to visit my brother who was living there at the time and went to the French Culinary Institute just on a tour and was like, my mind was blown. And I went home and I was like, I'm packing up. I'm leaving San Francisco. I'm moving to New York and I'm going to culinary school. Like
Just like that.
it was just like that. And it was just going there. And if it hadn't been that school, I don't know if I would have, actually gone through with it. But it was just such an easy decision the second that I saw it.
How old were you when you decided to go to culinary school?
I was, I think, 31. I was so much older than everyone that I went to school with.
Yeah, and that's kind of the path that as far as the questions go. But
Yeah.
before that, was there a light bulb though that you're living this life in San Francisco, you're happy, you're doing things, you're making money, you're successful, but did something happen where you're like, you said if I don't do it now, I may never do
Yeah.
it. Was that part of it? Like
That was part of it. And, as sometimes this happens, a relationship had ended for me. And I just was
yeah.
kind of like needing something new and fulfilling. And I loved real estate because it's like running your own little business, right? You're responsible for everything. You're responsible for your marketing. You're responsible
Hmm.
for everything. I loved that, but I wasn't creatively fulfilled. And that's why I was like, dipping my toe into like catering events and things like that, or interested in what my friends were doing with restaurants. Like that was just pulling me, but I couldn't figure out where I fit in with it. And like you said, everything was going really well for me. So it's like, maybe don't rock the boat. And then when I saw this school in New York, I was like, let's rock the boat. Like I need a change. And it was, again, it was like so instant and I just knew, and it was the best decision that I've ever made. Um, Missed the money of real estate, but everything else just totally fell into place for me with that decision.
Scary at all, or was it something like, it sounds like you just said no, this is it, and you did it with gusto, but was it scary at all, like at times where you're going, did I make the right decision?
No, it's funny.
Hmm.
I'm someone who like I really jump in with both feet. Like I'm a planner for sure, and I take my time with things, but when something in my gut feels right, I go for it.
Awesome.
And yeah, I never ever questioned it. Like all my friends were having kids, getting married. Like I was on this whole new life with like literally, 20-year-olds every day, 18, 19, 20-year-olds because this was their school, and so you would have thought that maybe I would have second guessed what I was doing because it was like such a different path, but it felt so right the whole time. Like, and it was an intensive program, what the FCI used to do, and then they turned into the International Culinary Center, and now unfortunately with COVID they're no longer there, but it was a 6-month program, intensive program, so you're at school 7 days a week, fully immersed, cooking from day one. The greatest program ever. I just, and to be a student at that age too, like I said before, in college, I went to really have fun and didn't probably take my education as seriously as I should. This, I was like the nerdiest, most probably annoying student ever. I was so into it. Flashcards, the works. Like I loved it.
Yes.
So yeah, it was great.
That is great. I like that. That is super nerdy. I think too, when you're looking around, and I used to say this to some of the reporters that I hired when I worked in TV, that don't look at everybody else's path, right? You could see someone next to you getting a job in Dallas or San Francisco or wherever. Don't get caught up in that, because your path is your path. And it doesn't really matter what everybody else is doing. You can't compare what those people are doing. You really have to focus on you, because your path is going to take you to certain places at certain times. And so it sounds like that's what happened to you.
That's absolutely. And I couldn't agree with that more. My path has certainly been different than all of my friends, I would say, along the way. And like, of course, what, everyone tells you as far as get married, have kids, all of that at these times in your life. And I was on a different plan, and I'm so grateful for it, because like I said, making that decision changed my life. It changed absolutely everything. And I'm so thankful that I did it.
When you make a decision and you're like, nope, this is what I'm going for, and all these years later, you look back and you're like, man, that was the right decision. Pat on my back. Good for me. Yes, that was exactly what I should have done.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there are times where, again, I'm like, should I go back into real estate? It's a lot better financially, but then I always come back to the fact that like, I feel like I was just kind of not lost before I made that decision, but I just didn't know where I wanted to be. And then once I made that decision, like over the last, 10 plus years, my life has taken many turns, but it stayed on a track as far as, being in the restaurant industry and all of the opportunities that have come up, good or bad situations. Like I've stayed on this path and have really loved it and really appreciated it, and only have wanted to jump off of it, just because it's like a moment of fear. But all in all, I have really like loved, and appreciated where I've been. And I can't say that, and that's also age too, but like I can't say that from my 20s to my 30s that like there was anything that was ever like anchoring me, and this really did that.
Ooh, I like that. Something that anchored you. I really like that. So, culinary school, what did you want to do? Did you want to be a chef? Was that the end goal?
I wanted to have my own catering company.
Okay.
So as I said that I'm someone who jumps in, full force, I'm also a planner, and I didn't feel like I could have probably started my own catering deal back in San Francisco, not gone to school, come up with it, started a business, and, probably would have been fine. But I'm someone who likes to have like a foundation in anything that I do. I don't like to skip steps. Like I like to know that I'm like as well-rounded as I possibly can be, and plan for things as best as I can. And so I wanted that foundation of school, and I knew I didn't need to go necessarily to like a 2-year or a 4-year program. Like that's what was so great to me about FCI, even though you get so much in those 6 months. And so I knew that would really help me feel certain that that I had the skill set to start my own business, and
the
go
credibility.
out and get business.
It's credibility too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
100%. Yeah, for sure. So that's what I wanted to do. And then that changed over the 6 months that I was there, and cooking more. And then I mean, it didn't necessarily change, but like I, as I was there, over those 6 months, I was like, maybe I won't move back to San Francisco. Maybe I will stay in New York. Maybe having a catering company in New York isn't the best thing. Maybe I will work in restaurants. It was like definitely a time for exploration for me, and trying to really determine where this would take me. But I knew that I was in the right place. Like I was 100% certain of that.
As far as being in the world of culinary arts.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I know you worked in a kitchen shortly
I
after.
worked I worked at Mercer Kitchen, which is a John George restaurant in Soho, and in the Mercer Hotel. I worked there. I hated it. It was it was so brutal. We had a real tough chef, and I just didn't like it. Like I loved being in a restaurant, but it was just like I felt like that's where like my age was just, I don't know, maybe it was an age thing, like where I was like, I'm not hungry enough to be like begging for the chance to work like the pizza oven, and like I want to be doing more. Like I want to be creating more. I don't really necessarily want to be doing this. Like I want to, like I was like, always looking at the way that like the restaurant was working as opposed to like being focused in the kitchen. I wanted to just have my hands in more. But it was really great for me to learn kitchens, and learn how back of house works, which, through the years I've found to be such a great strength in what I do.
Yeah.
Not a lot of front of house people know back of house.
Yep.
And I did that. And then I actually, the most, I would say influential job that I had while I was in New York, which people always think is just the strangest job ever. But I went to Saks Fifth Avenue, the flagship store, and worked there mainly doing catering. And, it sounds like such an odd job because there are 2 restaurants in this. I don't know if you've been to the Saks in New York, but
I haven't.
10 floors. It's ridiculous. Like, I mean, every floor is its own experience. Has 2 restaurants, but what I did was really on the event side. One of my closest friends from college was the VP of PR there, and she was like, "We're throwing all of these events for like, Gucci and Chanel and whatever, and we're serving them like frozen appetizers. Would you be interested in coming in and helping us, create a program that is more local and, some beautiful food that actually is aligned with the types of events that we're throwing?" And so I went and we did, over 3,000 events a year. And it was just because there were so many different events happening every single day throughout the building and across the street where corporate was. And and that number sounds nuts, but that's legitimately what we were doing. And It was just a small team of us, but it was such hard work. And it was so good for me to learn operations. Like I really, really, really started to understand the operations of food, of how it all worked, like from start to finish, from planning a menu to ordering to executing to whatever. I mean, like we, would throw parties on these different floors for like Oprah, and we would be cooking the food out of like an elevator shaft because that's what we had on that floor. So it was like creating a little like mobile kitchen there. The food would be good enough for a party like that. And so it was like the biggest crash course on, again, like operations, making things work, and doing it really, really, really well because the standards were set, so high.
Right. And it sounds like all of these things, working in a kitchen, doing events at Saks, really set you up for what you're doing now.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and I would say even like my real estate career did too, because that was like, learning again, how to run my own business, how to market, how to, do all of those pieces. And so when I look back now, everything was just such a building block on top of the next. And it was like this education that was being created as I was, going along to create the position that I'm in now. I mean, and some other things that have happened along the way, but it was certainly a really solid foundation to move to Portland with, to then, start like a true restaurant career here in Portland.
Yeah. So was that your next move from New York City to Portland?
Yep.
Okay.
Had an opportunity to come out here. All I wanted to do was get back to the West Coast. So I was in New York for a few years at that point, and I missed the West Coast.
I bet.
So I'm a West Coast person. I'm assuming you are.
Well, I'm from South Carolina originally, and lived on the West Coast since I was 16. And I just, especially the Pacific Northwest, I don't know if I could live anywhere else.
Well, right. Yeah. You're one or the other, I guess.
I think so.
Mean, some people can do both, but like, it wasn't for me. I love New York and I love the East Coast, but like, I will never live there again.
I get it.
And so I was looking for opportunities out here, and an opportunity came up that this investment group had a little, like a few restaurants that they had in their portfolio, and they, were tanking. And they basically said, you have somewhat of a business background, you have obviously a culinary background. If you can bring these restaurants to profitability, we will fund your own restaurant. And so, I flew out a couple of times, saw the restaurants. We brought them to profitability in 6 months. It was not hard. I mean, it was like basic operations
really
that needed to happen. Yeah, it was hard, obviously, but not hard. Like, it wasn't anything that there were just so many issues that it just needed a cleanup. And so then we started working on my first restaurant in Portland, it'll be 10 years ago in May, which is crazy to think about. But that was, I had lived here for about a year when we opened that.
And that restaurant?
And that was Riffle Northwest.
Okay.
A catch-inspired seafood restaurant.
Wow. In 10 years.
So it was 10 years ago. Yeah, this May, which is just wild to think about. Yeah, moved here and realized living in Portland, there wasn't a lot of seafood. And I thought that was so interesting, being so close to the coast.
Yeah.
And so I grew up fishing, fly fishing a lot with my dad. And, I love the ocean. Like, it just felt like something that I really wanted to do. And also felt very strongly about sustainability. And so, created this concept that was sustainable seafood, that lasted, I think we were open for a year and a half. There was a lot that happened in that year and a half that determined its end, but it was such an incredible experience, such an incredible restaurant. We're actually going to do a 10-year anniversary because we're all still so close. Like, that's still my family to this day.
Aww.
And, it was a very, very special time in my life, for sure.
Your dad, first of all, sounds awesome. Actually, your parents sound really awesome. He took you fly fishing and they hosted parties all the time.
Yes. Great parents.
They sound incredible. Were you, really quickly, were you the kid? I just talked, my last interview, she's a mixologist in New York City, and the reason, she says one of the reasons she went down that path was because of her grandma Dee. She threw a party for just no reason whatsoever, and I asked her what kind of kid she was when the adults through the party? Did you run away, or were you right there in the mix of all of it?
Oh, no, I was in the mix always. Oh, God, are you kidding? No, It's like I loved it.
Me
My
too.
parents threw parties like for everything. And, they were always the ones with the, whether it was a school fundraiser or holidays or whatever. I mean, I grew up raised by hosts. That's what I always say. It's definitely in my blood. And my grandma too was like the most incredible cook and host, every little detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on some level, a little bit of the same. Just we loved having people over, I guess, which not necessarily a party, but just very much like come over for dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A social household. Like that's
mm-hmm.
a fun place to be for sure.
Very, very social. So when did Holler Hospitality happen? So you're in Portland, you've moved back there, you opened this restaurant. When did Holler Hospitality? I know it was 6 years ago, correct?
Yeah, so years later.
Right.
So in between there, I ran a bar, opened and ran a bar called the Multnomah Whiskey Library, which was something very different for Portland and an incredible experience. It was just a little bit more high end than what Portland was used to, especially at that point. So I did that for several years. And then I went off on my own and I started consulting. I saw through my own experience and through losing my first restaurant, that people in this city at that point, not saying now, but at that point, really didn't know how to run a restaurant as a business. And that was one of the biggest lessons I took from losing my restaurant was like, oh, I wasn't totally looking at this like from a business angle. Like I was looking at it more as like a creative project. And so I went into consulting to really support, chefs or bartenders or whoever who wanted to open their own restaurant, look at it from more of a financial angle and create like a sustainable business as opposed to just like a fun concept. And, knowing that that's why so many restaurants don't make it.
Yeah. Really quickly, do you categorize losing that restaurant as a life lesson or do you consider it like a failure? How do you categorize that?
It's the biggest life lesson I had for sure, for a million reasons.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there are so many tied up in it. Just like everything, like I look at everything as, a building block or, setting me on my path in a new direction. And that certainly did. That coupled with running the Multnomah Whiskey Library, which was such a beast of an operation and a very successful one financially, the two together, so close together, was really what helped me just understand how to do this well, and to not make the same mistakes that so many people easily make because we have such a romanticized, idea of the restaurant industry. And it's so easy to fall into that. I still fall into it all of the time, and getting like creative and excited about things, but you've got to look at the other side of it.
So it sounds like you had a setback followed pretty closely by a win.
Yes.
Okay. That's helpful.
Crazy. It was really helpful because it took me a long time to learn the lessons in losing that restaurant. But I did. And so to have something that, yes, was like an immediate pick me up almost, it was great. It was amazing. I feel incredibly blessed. That was a tremendous opportunity that's helped me out a lot in my career.
Yeah, it sounds like to me your work ethic is insane and you're just somewhat of a workhorse where you're just like go, go, go. And I think for those types of people, we get really invested in what we do. So when you do have that setback, it's almost like this dramatic, the world is over, I'm done, I need to go look for something else. And then when you have that win, it's like, oh, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm on the right path. Okay. Phew.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. And I think, and again, this is like an age thing, like they've started to feel less extreme to me in the years to follow. But yes, 100%. Like when I lost my restaurant, I was like, I'm moving. I'm out of the restaurant industry. I'm done with this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I got back on track, and the Molten Whiskey Library was definitely a huge part of that. It grounded me even when I was asked to do that project, because it was literally like me closing down my restaurant and the owner of that place coming to my restaurant as I was closing it, being like, oh, well, now that you're free, can you come over here and help me open this place and help me with my other restaurant that's not doing well? And I was like, no, I'm sorry, dogs.
It's okay. I'm surprised mine have not barked. You're good.
I'm shocked that that's the first time that they have. Yeah. And so I even was like, I'll do it on a consulting basis. I'm moving to Seattle. I'm moving back to California. Like, I'm not committing to this. And then it just really snowballed into like the most amazing experience. And so I then stayed in Portland. And I credit that for keeping me here for sure.
Well, thank goodness for that. And it also sounds like you're no stranger to creating menus, creating a bar program, creating really what makes a place successful, hence the consulting, obviously, that you did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, like we talked about before, starting from scratch.
Right.
It's something that I love to do. I love looking for opportunities. So, where there's a void in the market, and understanding, what that could be is really, really fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And so, creating things that really speak to people instead of being super personal is something that I've also started to appreciate and understand a little bit better. Like, it's always great to, have your personal attachment to something and to a concept. But like, I've started to, like, something changed for me where I was like, I need to like look outside into the community a little bit more, as opposed to like doing something that's just for my own ego, or my own like personal want. And so that really helped me with my consulting too, of like telling other people to do that too. Like, don't hold it so close to the chest. Like, that's going to get you into trouble. Like, open your eyes a little bit more, see what's in front of you. That's going to help you have a more successful business than, thinking that your way is the only way.
A little less heartbreak too, sounds like.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
In Portland, in a city like Portland, I'm sure too, you can get really any type of food you want in Portland at any time. I mean, that's just reality of a city like that. So the challenge for you then sounds like finding something that maybe didn't exist or something that people were looking for.
Well, I think it's more the opposite, actually. Like, I think Portland is such a fun experimental city, and I've watched it over the last 12 years grow so much in every direction. And I think what I started to see, and like where Holler Hospitality came into play, was more like, okay, what's familiar to people? Like, you're getting all of these like crazy and inventive, donuts or whatever. Like, I mean, all of these like wild concepts that people are doing. Like, why don't we think about things that are like familiar and nostalgic and comforting in a way? Yeah. And, and like have like an anchor to something and make you feel something, and that is actually where I went in my consulting and then into Holler Hospitality. It's like, it's connect with people. Like, that's what's really important. Of course, people need to create and come up with wacky things and whatever, but like, also it's really nice to connect with someone over something that like actually sparks a memory for them, and nostalgia became like a really big part in when we created Holler Hospitality, of what we wanted to, accomplish with the concepts that we were creating for that reason.
And
that was the void to me. Simplicity and nostalgia was like really the void of what we were missing in Portland.
So it wasn't so much that, yes, you can find you can find all sorts of things maybe that are very similar in the city, but that was really for you, because that's the second time you've mentioned the word anchoring. So really finding something that's sense of stability for people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Of course.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead. Did you have a thought?
No. I was just going to probably go off more on that. No.
I love people who just go off. That's why I'm in the interview business. But no, I think there's something about that. Half the cookbooks I own are like comfort food based cookbooks, right? I mean,
Right. And it doesn't have to be like, for me, comfort food is different from, someone else's
Sure.
definition. Like for me, it's like truly like a memory or something that's very simple. It's not like mac and cheese, although that can be comfort food for someone for the same reasons. Comfort food for me is like a good steak and, and like what I grew up eating with my family at dinner. Like, and again, things that are very simple and not overdone is how I feel comfortable in a dining experience.
Right. Not something that's not so intimidating. Because, I mean, let's face it, there are lots of restaurants out there that can be intimidating when you go and sit down and start to order and you're just like, I don't know.
Totally. And I've had so many of those experiences, like I've been in food for long enough that I've dined at every kind of restaurant imaginable. And I've done plenty of traveling and, I try to check out everything and don't just stay in what I'm comfortable in, but that's just not where I want to be at the end of the day, in those experiences. They're great. They're beautiful. It's just not for me.
It's not for you.
Or what I want to also be creating.
Not your path. I get it.
Not my path. Yeah.
Holler Hospitality. So where did this idea come from? Because this is essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a restaurant group. Okay.
Yep. So it is now. So I was consulting for a new hotel project back in, I guess, like 2016 in Portland called Woodlark Hotel. And my job was to find the right food and beverage partners. And there was a restaurant and a bar and then meeting spaces. And this hotel was just this incredible project as far as, there's not a lot of like historic buildings in Portland. And this was two buildings that were from 1907 and 1911 that they were combining to create this boutique hotel, which just was very cool to me that preservation was happening with, these beautiful buildings. And so I spent a year trying to find the right food and beverage partners and traveled all over the country and just, had a great bar group out of San Francisco that wanted the bar. And then in our own backyard was this chef Doug Adams, who was down the street in another hotel at the time, who was the first person that I asked when I started this process. He said no. And then after a year of traveling all over the country and going to Canada, like to meet all of these different chefs, he was like, I want in. And so, he basically, though, all he had was the name of his restaurant, which was named after the town that he grew up in Bullard, Texas. And that was it. He didn't have, he had like an idea of a menu, but like, I was meeting with all of these restaurant groups who had like, packet like decks and menus and everything. And he was just like, Bullard, that's what I want it to be called. And I'm like, this is kind of a huge multi-million-dollar project. We need a little bit more. And so I worked with him on basically creating the concept, creating the menus, creating a tasting for the owners of the hotel. And there were two other groups at this point that were really interested in the project, who I'd been working with for months. And he did a tasting. He knocked it out of the park. He had every answer ready to go for them as far as like how the business would run. Like we really worked, on putting this together. I put like a deck together of the concept. Anyway, they were like, yep, it's you. And then the next day he's like, I don't have anyone to do this with me. Will you do this with me? And I was still consulting at this point, and I was like, I can't get back into restaurants like that. Like my consulting world is so nice and like just cozy and I like it. And this is a big risk. And I ended up saying yes. And I was like, I'm going to get back in it. And then the bar group out of San Francisco, it didn't work out. And then we were like, we want the bar too. And so we had to do a lot of convincing for that. I had 24 hours to come up with a concept for that. Didn't sleep all night, put one together because they were meeting with another bar group out of New York who really wanted it. So we got that. And then there was also a coffee bar connected to check-in, and the hotel wanted to run that. And I was like, it makes no sense for F&B to be split up. So we'll take the coffee bar also. And so that was basically Holler Hospitality was created.
Wow.
On those three. And then since then we've opened up a couple of other places, but that's how it started.
That's Boulder Tavern, I'm assuming.
Yep. So Bullard Tavern is our restaurant. Abigail Hall is our bar. And then we partnered with our friends, Good Coffee, which is a coffee company in Portland, to do the coffee bar.
Fantastic. And so it was sort of born from there. And then did you so Abigail Hall and Bullard Tavern, that's in the same location?
Yep. And same with the coffee bar. They're all under one roof.
Okay.
In the hotel.
And then at this point, was it just like, how did that happen? Did you just say, let's call this something? Or let's just, do you want more? Do you want like, let's open up another restaurant? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so what was important to us with creating Holler Hospitality is there's still, some judgment on hotel restaurants. Like, even though they're very cool and they're all over this country in, beautiful hotels, great restaurants, fantastically talented chefs, people still have this like idea of a hotel restaurant. And we're like, okay, if we create our own group and we aren't like part of the hotel necessarily, and we're a restaurant group, this then, like gives us our own identity basically. And so, that's why we originally did it. Okay. And then we basically were like, we want to do more, and so about a year into all of that being open, that's when we started really looking for other opportunities and created our next two concepts.
Was that
one concept?
Holler. PDX?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Just, yeah.
What's the judgment with restaurants and hotels?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think people still think that they are like, stuffy or whatever, like just not enough personality, and we worked so hard to create these like true identities and concepts of this restaurant and this bar. They really, really have such a unique design to them. They work with the hotel, but they are their own animals. And it was really important for us to feel like a standalone restaurant for our staff too, not feel like you work in a hotel. We want you to still feel like you work in a cool restaurant in Portland, and you're not part of this massive operation. So there were like many reasons why we chose to, try to section it off from the hotel.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Why Holler? Why the name Holler? Is there a story?
Yes, there is. It's like my favorite story.
Yes.
So Doug, who I co-founded the company with, we were doing a consulting project in Milwaukee, and whenever I go to a new city, I like research like crazy where we're going to go eat and drink. And
I like you, Jen.
Called, I mean, like I'm nuts, like till the point that the plane lands, I am like trying to find everything possible. So I found this place in Milwaukee called the Holler House, or Holler House, not that. And it was in this like neighborhood, not near anything, not the safest neighborhood. And I had read on Wikipedia that it had the first bowling alley in the country in the base of this house. And so I was like, we got to go check it out. It's still a bar. It was like it was on like a bunch of like, lists and everything. And so I was like, I need to see what this is all about. Sorry, my dog just ran in
All good.
unexpectedly.
All good.
And so we went, and we were with someone who was from Milwaukee, and she thought we were nuts to want to go there. And we walk in, and this is literally like someone's house, but a bar. And there are bras hanging from everywhere. It's packed full of people, and everyone is sitting around the table with this 93-year-old woman. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, there were just so many things to see.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out that it was a 5th generation bar. Marcy, who was a 93-year-old woman, it was her birthday party. She still worked the bar 5 days a week. This was her night off because she was hung over from the night before, taking too many tequila shots.
Shut up.
Her whole family was there. She lived like literally you walked through a door behind the bar, and she lived like I had to use the bathroom in her apartment while we were there. Her grandkids were down in the basement with the pinball, like bowling alley that was still in operation, and they were the pin setters. And we hung out with her family all night long and had literally the best experience, like one of my top 5 favorite nights of my entire life. And she was just so incredible. We have a drink of a like a little Miller High Life pony and a little scoot of tequila called the Marcy on our menu at Abigail Hall. And we hung out with her all night long. It also, that drink comes with a dirty joke, like that we have in a little capsule, because
Oh my God,
she told the dirtiest jokes ever, and like made Doug blush because they were just so outrageous. And anyway, so when we were trying to name our company, we were like, what's our favorite thing that we've ever done together? And both of us were like, it was Holler House, of course. And so we named it Holler Hospitality.
Okay, that is maybe one of the best stories that I've ever heard.
It just like, I get kind of chills like talking about it, because it was it was such a memorable experience.
Mm-hmm.
And she unfortunately passed away 2 years ago.
I was going to ask.
Like, just left such a mark, and we let them know that we named the company that. And she was supposed to take the train out with her friend to come and see Abigail Hall. But that didn't happen because of COVID and everything, but, or her family was going to. And so, yeah, it was a real special moment for sure. Special night.
That's so great. I love that you have a drink named the Marcy. I mean, did she
Marcy?
Like, she played such a huge part in all of this. It sounds like.
Yes. It was, I mean, it was so significant, as far as, and it was just like, so what we wanted to do with Holler too. Like when I was talking about like simple dive bar, like again, the two of us, we did so much traveling before we opened these places, and we ate at like some of the best restaurants, that you could eat at in this country, and all over New York, New Orleans, like everything. And that was like by far our number one experience. And it was just all about, the people and that setting.
Do you know the reason for the bras?
Yeah. I mean, she was like a pretty significant female figure in the Milwaukee area. She at one point lost her liquor license due to like a mismanagement of mail, and that was her livelihood. And so she basically like went down to City Hall and started like this little protest that then turned into like this, huge mob of people outside of Holler House. And bras became a part of it, women supporting women. And so hanging bras from the ceiling, like, was all a part of the story and supporting Marcy and Holler House.
The story gets better and better.
Oh yeah. Rich with material. Like, I mean, it was just incredible.
I looked at some of the menus, Abigail Hall, Bullard Tavern, Holler PDX. I noticed, I think there's a burger on every menu. Is that correct? Okay. Any reason? Are you a burger fan? I am, for sure.
Nostalgia again.
Yes.
I mean, and like, that's just what people like. And
so true.
Each of them have their own distinct personality. Mine, so, Doug created, well, not the one right now at Bullard Tavern, because we have a new chef there, but the original burger for Bullard Tavern. And it was based off of like a burger that he grew up with in Texas. And then the one at Abigail Hall is a cross between In-N-Out and Jack in the Box, which were the two burgers that I grew up with. And then the one at Holler is just a really good burger that, smash burger that people crave. So each of them have their own identity. Who does not love a burger?
I'm here for it. That's one of my, in all things that I crave in the food world, it's always a cheeseburger. Always. A good one.
Yeah, a good one.
I also know you have trout on the menu at Holler PDX, and I love that. That really caught my eye.
Yeah. Something, it was also a big connector for when Doug and I became partners. He's a fly fisherman.
Yeah, okay.
And I, grew up with that. My dad and Doug were also close, and fishing was just a thing between us. And so, yeah, trout was on our opening menu at Bullard also.
Do you see hospitality groups like this? Is this something that's a trend? Is this something that's always been around? Is it something that died and is coming back, or has it really changed as far as like hospitality groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've always been around. I think like we look at Danny Meyer, like has the most successful hospitality group there is. And they're all over the world. And what's different though in Portland is that there hasn't really been too many, and so it's really cool to see them being developed. There have been a couple over the last 12 years since I've lived here, but only a couple. And so really, really cool to see, because it just creates such great opportunity if you do it well, as far as, like fostering talent and raising talent up through a restaurant group, because you're just providing, additional opportunities for others, is the way that I look at it. And that's what I love most about it, is like growing people and like having, directions to like point people in while you're still working with them, which I love. And so it's really cool to see it happening more and more in Portland. I love it.
Are you seeing more women in the hospitality industry? I know for me, just doing research, there's more women mixologists who are carving their own paths and creating bar programs, distillers, restaurateurs. So I know it seems like it's definitely something that's evolving and changing.
Definitely. I mean, thank goodness.
Thank
it is.
Goodness.
I still am not seeing as many restaurateurs as I'd like to see, but it's happening. Like you can feel the ground shifting for sure, which is great.
One question I had for you within the hospitality industry, I wonder if there is there a certain point where you're a bartender or a server and that shifts? There's a shift there where they go, I can actually do something more with this. I can become a bar owner, or I can do consulting work and start, consulting with bar programs, or the same on the restaurant side. Do you see that shift at all in people when, like you've had a job since you were 14 and maybe you're a server, you do catering, you go to culinary school, and there's that shift where it becomes now something that's just a job that turns into a career?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to see that happen.
Really?
And because I've been doing it for long enough now, I see it more and more. And, what I do when I hear that is, when you start to see someone think, I'm going to make a career out of it, it's like the mom in me jumps in and is like, okay, if you see a career out of this, if you want to own one day, like, here's all the things that you need to do. Because I still go back to, I never, like, losing that restaurant was the hardest thing that's, ever happened to me professionally. And I just never want someone to go through that sort of heartbreak. And it's so easy to happen. Like, I mean, it's why restaurants and bars fail so easily, COVID aside, like, and why we have such a failure rate, because again, people like romanticize it. And it's like, okay, don't skip the steps, like learn how to run a business, please. Like, you'll carry your passion out for a lot longer if you know how to actually make that switch and make it in a smart way.
Wow. So yeah, consulting, you opened businesses, you did real estate, you went to culinary school. What can't you do, Jen Quist? What cannot you do?
Oh, I don't know. I just became a mom, so
Oh,
I'm working at that too.
congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, so I have a little 4-month-old, so that's my
God.
latest project to tackle.
Girl, you're busy. You're busy.
Yeah, but I like it.
We're gonna wrap up and get to the final three. But the end goal with Holler Hospitality, is it to maintain? Are you looking to open more restaurants? I mean, I know the pandemic was a doozy for this industry. So what's the end goal?
I think it's to maintain for now, and see where I am a doer and I always like growth. But I think that after, especially last year, like 2020 was about survival. Last year I was like, let's grow. Let's keep going. And I wore people out, I wore myself out. And so it's like, let's just relax for a little bit. I mean, not relax, but let's do the work for now and not think too much into the future. Let's get on our feet. Let's support our community. Like, let's bring things back to life and get this city back on its feet.
Yeah.
And then go from there. Like, it's just, growth is just not anything to think about. And that's really hard for me to say because I'm always wanting to do more and more and more and more and more.
I'm getting that. I'm feeling that vibe from you.
Yeah.
Well, awesome.
Just chill. Yeah.
It's hard. I think, it sounds like you do have crazy work ethic, and it's hard. It is hard when you're just like, I don't know if you have days where you just don't have a lot on your plate and you're like, oh, that's going to be nice. And then that day comes around and you're like, I don't know what to do with myself.
Oh yeah. Can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, having a newborn was like, other than having a newborn being the greatest thing ever, was also the greatest thing ever, just because it's like, something new and stimulating and just incredible.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on that. Let's wrap up and get to the final three. Best advice you've ever been given.
So it goes back to Riffle. My dad, when that restaurant closed, he said, write 50 lessons that you learned. And I was so angry when we closed, and I was like, 50 lessons. I don't need to learn 50 lessons. I was like very put off by it, but it was the best thing that I ever did. It took me about a year to write 50 things. And because, I mean, that's a lot of time, to think through that, all of the things that went right and wrong, and, and to find 50 things that I learned. But what really came out of it was a lot of what we've talked about, and also having accountability. I was like blaming everyone else and blaming the city of Portland and my location and my partnerships and all of this stuff. And it was so important for me to learn about accountability through that. And so it set me off on just such a good path, and was the best exercise I've ever done in my life.
Man.
So that would be the best advice.
Thanks, Dad.
Sure.
That is good advice.
Yeah.
Riffle really, that changed you hugely.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I mean, we're all still so close.
Yeah.
It was a very personal thing. It was a personal concept, but it was also a personal place to be every day, and it was my life. Like, it was, I actually, I credit it for a lot. A lot of what it taught me.
It sounds like it. Absolutely. What's your happy place?
I mean, the easy answer is obviously my new daughter, but I would say anytime I step on a plane, I'm like, I get a rush. It's so crazy. It doesn't matter where I'm going. I could be going to like Bakersfield, and I'm so excited to, no offense to anyone from Bakersfield.
No.
But I love going somewhere and traveling. So, and I notice it literally every time I step onto a plane, I get this little exciting feeling, and I just can't wait to start traveling again. That's my happy place.
That's so great. I'm the opposite.
Do you hate flying?
I hate it. I'm like the white knuckling, the whole time. But that's
I grew up on planes, and I get it. I mean, but it's such a place to just get away from everyone. It's your own space. you're off to somewhere. I
It's
just love
the sense of adventure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. In all things, food and drink, what do you crave? What always sounds good to you?
I know it's crazy because I would say something like a burger or a steak, but I thought about this because we went out for our anniversary last week, which was like our first night out away from the baby. And I wrote to someone like, I'm just craving sitting at a bar. And then I thought about it, and it's like, I crave experience. Like I crave being in a place that like I feel so comfortable, like having a martini, and just like the sounds and the movement of a restaurant or a bar. I crave that way more than I crave food or drink specifically. Like, and it's true. I think about all of my favorite experiences that I've ever had in food and drink, and it's always about like the whole experience. It's never about like that bite, So I crave experience for sure.
I get that. That's probably the first time anyone has said craving the experience, but I so get where you're coming from. Like there's nothing like just sitting at a cool bar and ordering a fun cocktail.
Totally. And it was the best. It lived up to it. Like it was all I wanted. And it was like and it wasn't about the martini. It was just like sitting at that bar. I didn't want to leave. I was like so happy. I loved watching everything. Like it just was the greatest.
Yeah. It's a sense of theater, in my opinion. It's like,
for sure.
Watching the show. I get it. I totally get that. Jen Quist, you have been fascinating. Thank you for shedding some light on the hospitality industry, because I've learned a lot from you today. I've also learned that I don't want to open a restaurant.
It's not easy.
No, it's not. I am so impressed by you guys to not only open a restaurant, but to maintain and have that consistency. I feel like that may be the hardest part, is the consistency, right? So when I go and drink and have a drink at the bar, it's the same drink that I got a month ago.
Yep. It's so hard. And it's so confusing at times too. Like I remember when I opened Riffle, I was like, oh, I'm so used to events, where it's like you're done with an event. And I'm like, we have to do this again and again and again and again for however long. Like, it's mentally challenging at times, but it's also so rewarding.
Sounds like it. Okay. Jen Quist, co-founder of Holler Hospitality. Fantastic story too about Holler Hospitality. I absolutely love that. That's definitely going to be one of my social promos, because it's such a good story. But thank you so much. You've been very, very interesting, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and kudos to all the success.
Thank you so much, Trish. Really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma with me, Trish Glose. You can watch this podcast and subscribe on my YouTube channel. Just search Hungry for More, an Epicurean's Dilemma. You can also listen and subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts.